I'm Jean Gray, founder and publisher of American Entrepreneurship Today, a website that brings news and valuable information to entrepreneurs, innovators, and investors all across America. Our podcast series, Experience Voices, explores the journeys of very successful people in the entrepreneurial arena who are open to sharing the key elements that led to their great success.
Our guest today on Experience Voices is medical device innovator and entrepreneur Dr. Peter Bonutti. Dr. Bonutti offers insight about the innovation process that has yielded over 500 patents and applications over the course of his career. He shares the challenges he overcame and the key elements he learned over the years to become a highly successful and prolific innovator. That includes product commercialization. He describes his two latest innovations, UV-Seed, a portable UVC disinfectant device, and Relieve, a medical device that counters very severe headaches. Welcome to Experience Voices, Dr. Bonutti. I'm looking forward to speaking with you about your innovations.
Thanks for the opportunity and look forward to a nice discussion.
Well, let's start with your two latest innovations, UV-Seed and Relieve, so that the listener can have an understanding of really how active you are in innovation and you're applying it to really current day challenges.
Well, thanks. They cover a really broad spectrum. UV-Seed is something more straightforward in the consumer electronics space, where an average individual can use this attached to their mobile phone to allow for disinfection of surfaces, foods, ways to help yourself in the antimicrobial space, which is obviously very important within our post-COVID world. The other is the extreme opposite. It's a class 3 medical implantable device that you implant near the brain and use this device to treat complex issues from cluster headaches, which are what some people call suicide headaches, all the way to treating problems such as strokes or areas with the blood-brain barrier to allow chemotherapy agents to enter the brain. So we're talking, two ends of a very, very large spectrum of innovation. One is a over-the-counter type technology in the consumer space, and the other is probably the most difficult FDA-regulated product.
It pretty much reflects the over 500 patents and applications you've had over your career. So I think anyone would just fundamentally want to ask you is how do you innovate? How did you start this whole process years ago that has led to such, a prolific production of so many products?
Well, thanks. I started when I was a resident. I had a background in biology and physics. And when I was a resident studying surgical techniques, there was a mentor I had that took an area of complex spine problems and said he had a new technology or a new approach. He had no specific background in spine surgery, but he said, look at that. I believe in this. I'm going to spend my time and money. And he created what we call now interpedicular fixation, or he revolutionized spine surgery. I worked with him and he taught me to challenge the status quo and to say, just because you're taught something or you're shown something doesn't mean it's the best, it's the correct, or it's the only option. And he told me that if I would look at technologies, look at ideas and see that I could add value or improve, then I should look at pursuing that. And so as I was studying in residency, I started looking at medicine from the patient's perspective. And developed technologies that started with minimally invasive surgical procedures. And I said there has to be a better way to approach or to treat patients. And from those backgrounds or those types of challenges, I became very inquisitive and started looking and saying, hey, just because my professor told me this is how you do a knee replacement doesn't mean that this is the only way or the best way. And then we looked at what patients wanted: less pain, fast recovery, better motion. Started developing minimally invasive implants to repair tissues, ligaments, then a whole minimally invasive approach to total knees. Then we went to robotic systems, and now artificial intelligence and how to enhance this. So I basically took that and said, I have an obligation to improve the quality of medicine. As a doctor, I felt that medicine should not just be practiced, but each individual that's involved in the medical space should strive to improve the quality of care. And that could be simply through the day-to-day practice, or in my situation, look at taking technologies and try to improve them. And that's what I basically lived the 35 years I've been in medical practice, try to constantly innovate and improve. And the follow-up to that is it's more that it's not just simply saying, hey, I have an idea or a concept. You have to think about it, act on it, invest in it, your own time and your own funds to take those to the next level. So a lot of people have great ideas, but they don't go to the next step. They don't research, they don't fund, they expect other people to put investments in without the individuals spending their own time and their money. So I've learned that literally no one will take you seriously unless you're taking these processes further downstream. Say, I not just have an idea, but I've acted on that idea. I've invested in this idea, and I see that there's potential future returns. So will you as you go to other businesses or other individuals, either to raise money or take the products further downstream, you have to show that you've made those investments as well. And they have to have the confidence that you believe in this, so much so that you put your time, your money, your effort.
How much research do you do when you have a new idea? Are you using, are you just going on the internet, or because you're in the medical device industry, you're using some of the industry tools to find out what other intellectual properties out there, or if this is something that is just a totally novel approach that spurs you on?
Basically, what I do is I see areas that I think can be enhanced or improved on. I always go, why? Why do you do this? Why does it have to be this way? Is there I call it the least common denominator, or the simplest approach. If I can distill a concept down to its simplest or most rudimentary approach, then I start to say, hey, this is something that may be worth pursuing. And then you also look at market size and other things. But research, yes, in the medical device space, counting on some of my own background helps. But a lot can be done through internet searches. I go to PubMed, I'll do search research papers. Then you go into the patent office, the USPTO, that's the Patent and Trademark Office, or you go to Google search. You then look at your product or idea and see what other people have done. And then you can ruminate, think about this, and start to say, hey, I can add value here. I can add this. I can add this. And then I continue the searches. Sometimes you build on your own ideas, but which is what I've done over the last 35 years. And our patents build upon themselves, or you can go into completely new areas and build on research others have done. So, but research sometimes, can take just a few hours. Sometimes it can take weeks or months. And then I will go to other individuals that I know, that I trust, and I'll start to bounce ideas off of them. So since I'm not an electrical engineer, or I'm not a mechanical engineer, I'll bring an electrical engineer, mechanical engineer, say, hey, what do we do in this space? Or a computer engineer, if I'm interested in artificial intelligence, say, how do we write these programs and algorithms? Start bringing them in. The challenge is, as you bring outside people in, there's always the idea that your technologies can walk or be stolen or be shared by others. So very early on, we do what's called a provisional patent. So as I get to the point where I think there's something substantive there, and I start to look at sharing these ideas to enhance them or improve them, I'll do a quick patent search. And then the USPTO has a site for what's called provisional patent. And for $100, you can sit and file your initial ideas with a background of the idea, some sketches, and how you've improved, and kind of lay down the rudiments of your, or the basics of your idea. Once those are demarcated and filed at the patent office under provisional, you have 1 year from that date to expand on and refine them, and you have some degree of protection in discussing with others. I've used in the past NDAs, non-disclosures, or CDAs with larger companies. Those are of minimal efficacy. If you ever take those to court, they're usually thrown out of really little to no value. But it's important to have things that in your position to protect you, documents, or at least handwritten with dates and times that show when you came up with the concept. But now it's the first to file, so it's the first person to write a provisional patent. Gives you some protection, and then I use that as a platform to start chatting with others who have specialties that are complementary, and add or build onto that, and then add on to this provisional patent. So at 1 year level, when you have to file a formal patent, you've worked out that technology or that idea. Does that help?
So assuming the entrepreneur and innovator has done their research and it looks good, they see a pathway forward, is the next step for you or for anyone to make a prototype, that you actually have a working model to promote or to show to potential investors or users? Where's the role of the prototype in this?
The prototype can be done in various stages. Since I have a facility in-house that I can do that under confidential direction, we do that fairly early on. But again, as you start to build things, you have to be a little careful that those ideas, which happen to me very early on, don't walk away. If they're really radical or unique or special, people tend to look and tend to, I have to have ideas that are kept somewhat secure. So there is always that area. It's important. But yes, the role of the prototype also was very helpful in refining the technology, defining it. And especially now as the Supreme Court has ruled that you need to, as you file patents, you need to have a more full description of your technology within the body of the patent itself. It's very, very important to work those ideas as far downstream as you can. So building a prototype and sitting there and going through the entire process can be very, very useful, not just for the defining the idea and refining the idea, but also to sit there and when you document it and place it in the patent office, it gives you more strength or more validity in the patent process.
Well, now that you've been producing so many innovative products, is it been easier for you to approach a large corporation because you have such a track record?
It does help, but it's still challenging. For the small inventor, it's always really, really difficult to approach large companies and gain some degree of interest. So even with the group that we have, our innovation center, Bonutti Research, we have about 20 employees. We have a full machine shop, R&D, electrics lab, small computer lab. Even in our group, getting a large company interested in taking your technology has changed substantially. And most businesses, most large multinationals now want the product developed and on the market with some degree of sales so that they've de-risked the technology. In other words, companies now, they're going to invest huge money. They want to know that their marketing and sales organization, which they're good at, can take this idea and sell it. They don't want to take any risk of developing the product and seeing if it's going to fail. They want to eliminate as much of that risk as possible. So they want the individual inventor to take this as far downstream as possible, specifically taking it all the way into the market and getting some market acceptance before they even look at it. So it's become very difficult over the last few years. And that's in part because patents have become less valuable, and also in part because the large multinationals have these large marketing and sales organizations, and they're just trying to leverage those rather than leverage innovation. Does that make sense? Or
for sure.
It's made it tougher. It's made it tougher to get your technologies out there, partnering. So there you have to go and find capital. Most people don't have that type of capital. We're not all like Elon Musk, where we have, billions of dollars at our disposal to sit and develop a technology. So you have to go to investors at this point to take it that far downstream when you're more than just doing a prototype or even an initial product. When you start doing marketing, sales, distribution, the idea of developing a product is maybe 25 to 30% of the overall cost. 70, 75% is marketing, sales, distribution. So you have to then start looking at getting investors, and that ends up taking more time than actually building the product. So it requires a whole different skill set, taking it further downstream. So it's become more difficult over the last decade or so, in my opinion. However, it can be done, and you have to have a solid basis, and you have to be willing to take this as far downstream as you can in order to really gain value from your technology.
Many entrepreneurs and innovators do not, especially the first-time ones, don't have the teams in place. And what you just described about how important it is that they go to market with this product. So how do they approach the fact that they are deficit at the very beginning? Are some of the accelerators that are now around the country, are the accelerators acting as the bridge between the entrepreneur and the potential customers for their products and innovations?
There are many incubators, business incubators, innovation centers. Some call them innovation studios that are specific for certain types of technologies. And yes, those can be helpful. Unfortunately, many of them do want some degree of control early on. So if you may have, a groundbreaking innovation, they'll co-develop with you. But unfortunately, there's financial and risks of control that sometimes the innovator struggles with. So that is a good source. You have to sell them on your idea. You have to put together a business summary, which also includes some financials as to why these people would want to pursue your technology. So you have to sell them on your technology, but they can help and they can short circuit it because they have all the resources under one roof. Whereas as an individual inventor, you may have to find somebody that does mechanical engineering, electrical. You may have somebody else that do sketches, drawing. Then you got to find somebody that can help you market, sale, distribute. That can be very, very difficult to do in one shop. It takes time. So yes, an incubator studio can be very helpful, but make sure as you look at the contracts that you still maintain some semblance of control, both financial and the direction of the technology, because oftentimes you lose that.
We're seeing a lot of the VCs changing their model a bit where, in addition to funding, they are looking at themselves as an incubator as well. So there's this very common model that's springing up in areas that used to be disparate. Now they're trying to be almost like a full service provider to their funded portfolio companies. Have you seen any of that happen, or have you interfaced with any of the medical device venture capital firms?
There are a lot of, in the medical device space, there's a lot of hospital systems, Mayo, for example, that have a full development, and they also invest in technologies that may be synergistic to what they're working on. There are also venture capital firms, such as one I have some relationship with, Stepstone, that has a large venture capital group that does offer all types of manifestations, and they can help put you together with others. You have to have an idea, a technology that obviously merits substantial interest or has a good market size for them to be interested. But yes, there are venture firms that do that, and there are specific spaces that are hot that they tend to spend more time. Right now, AI is really hot, so anything in the AI space, you can get a better look than something, for example, in the medical device space, which is kind of frowned on. It's not as exciting, or there's not maybe as much potential return. So it's tougher to get funding in certain spaces, let's say medical device versus, high tech or something else. The second is that if you look, there are angels that are also in these spaces, individual groups that have high net worth families, and they also will make specific and sometimes substantive investments that can help you bridge that financial gap and or help you network. So angel organizations, individuals of high net worth, also are good sources to start looking at this. The biggest problem was since Silicon Valley Bank went under, which is the largest funder for venture capital. That means that when that went under, that affected a lot of the early stage venture capital money. So it's been very difficult this year to find, venture capital that will invest in early stage. So there are some unique challenges that exist this year that probably didn't exist before. But capital is tough right now.
Going back to your early days when you were doing your first products and innovations, what did you learn in your inexperience that you changed in your MO that then allowed you to accelerate? Because I always like to ask the entrepreneurs and the innovators, the first 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 years are really brutal. And then you hit a milestone that opens up the doors and improves things out. So someone who's listening to this and they're sitting on a great idea, what are they in for? I think you've already touched on it a bit, but looking back on your particular pain points, how did it change your approach?
Oh, well, first I can start. My first technology I worked on was drug-eluting technology for implants. So I ended up putting an NDA in place, disclosing the technology. I didn't have quite the funding or the background. So this was 1987. And I sat there, and it was really novel because that ultimately became concepts around the drug-eluting stent, which is now a standard of care for cardiac disease and peripheral vascular disease. But long story short, so I disclosed that, did not file a patent, waited a couple years till I started my medical practice, used funding from a medical practice to file a patent. Little did I know that the non-disclosure agreement was taken and used by a major multinational whose name will be remain quiet at this point. And they basically took that technology, shared it with another individual. He ended up adding it to his patent and became very famous in this whole space. I ended up filing a patent in 1990, but they were able to say, well, he filed his patent a year ahead of you, adding this technology onto it. And so I ended up losing, a large segment of some of my early technology on this whole drug-eluting space. I followed that up with next challenge was I developed some technologies on balloon expansion devices to dissect and/or to open spaces up in the human body for minimally invasive surgery. And we developed structural balloons that would shape and have specific sizes. I went to surgeons that I thought I could trust and said, look, they're in my space. And they trust me. We'll co-develop this. I've developed products on the West Coast and little did I know that I assigned a very valuable batch of patents. I assigned them rather than licensed them. So, and then he ended up, using me to file a patent litigation, because someone else predated his patents and mine predated everybody. So he ended up over a handshake and an assignment. I lost control of the patents and ultimately he ended up selling his businesses for $450 million and I got $75,000 for my patent. And, he ended up making quite a bit. And then by the third go around, I finally started to figure things out and I was able to look at some of the residual patents that I had and license expanding access devices to a very formidable company and allows, is now used daily in general surgery for vascular or for endoscopy and access. But I learned a lot about the idea of the handshake, trust, and even though you like people and they appear very honest and very fair, you've got something really substantial. You have to protect yourself and always think of the worst case situation and develop a right team around that you can trust. But I learned, first 10 years of my patenting world were very, very difficult, and the innovation was very difficult, very costly, and learned a lot of lessons. But it took me 10 years before I really was able to monetize some of the technology. So you have to persist, you have to keep putting money behind it, and you have to believe in yourself. It takes a long time.
Well, I think you touched on what I was thinking is that as you went through the process, having a tight team around you ended up being the proving ground for you being confident. So how would you describe your tight team as you began to sort of wisen up to the world around you and have to say, this is the person who's my right hand guy or gal who I can go to, and now you have 20 people working in a shop for you. So they're covered under all of these, non-disclosure agreements and your hiring process. But back then, and where a lot of people are sitting in that space saying, who do I go to and show what I have?
Yeah,
it's helpful. Hard answer.
And it's very difficult. And I have businesses, I have several hundred employees, and it's finding good people that you trust and that add value. It's hard to do. It's probably the single most challenging thing I believe in business is really finding good people that you can work with, and then they meld with your personality and your styles. It took me about 10 years before I really found individuals that I could really trust and work with long term. But I initially started with a simple machine shop and had a little machinist, and we'd make stuff after hours in the evening. I bought a machine shop and kind of grew that from there, and hiring people. I mean, probably I would say 1 out of every 4 or 5 people ended up being long term. Although my senior staff has been with me minimum of 20 to 25 years and or longer, and we enjoy the concept of ideation, sitting over there, looking at a concept, looking at the rudiments of an idea, of the basics, and then start to build how to expand. How one person on the electrical side, mechanical side, a computer side, how we add value, how we sit there and refine the technology, bring it back, go over, build a prototype, refine it, then file patents, then try to take it to market, So our biggest challenge has been on the marketing, sales, distribution side. But in general, building a team is difficult, and it's probably the single most important thing for an innovator, because one person can't have all the ideas. One person can't have all the answers to some of these complex technologies that exist. So you have to bring on board or consultants, staff that helps you, people that are synergistic and that can add value to your technologies. In fact, I've even found that the patent attorneys sometimes are extremely helpful in adding on. They often are engineers themselves, and they can add to the process. So building that type of team is useful. And so in-house, we have a patent group, we have a regulatory affairs group, we have engineering group of people in each different facet. And then we have machinists who add a lot too. People who actually put things together and show you a prototype and then refine it as well. So all those people are excellent and part of the process. And I thank all the ones who work for me, but it requires a lot of people to really refine it and develop a true product as opposed to an idea or even a patent.
We touched on a lot of the setbacks and challenges. Would you say it's fair that when you began this in the 80s and where we are today, especially with the internet, the web, how the digital economy is taking, that there is a totally different perspective about innovation than it was in the bricks and mortar world?
Oh, absolutely. Over the last 35 years, the technologies and the approach to innovation have completely changed. In some ways, it's become easier because you have access to information that didn't exist before. And even internationally, you have access to experts in different spaces. So sometimes we'll consult with people that we'll never see. When we're looking at software, we have someone in Ukraine, or we might have someone in India that might help us. And so the access to staff, access to expertise now is more worldwide than it used to be. On the other hand, also the ability to protect your technology or you protect your ideas and or monetize it has become much, much more difficult because people expect something much more sophisticated, much more refined. So the chance to get an exit and monetize or receive funds, which then use to work on the next project, that's become much more limited because you have to take things further downstream. So it's become, although on one hand, it's become easier to access experts, technology. On the other hand, it's become much more difficult to protect your ideas and or to take them to market where it becomes more costly. So it's, I would say 35 years ago, I could spend a few $1,000s, spend, months of my time, put something together and potentially launch a product. Now it's sometimes a decade or longer before you can actually take things and bring them to fruition and much, much more expensive. So, I would say today is it's a completely different environment than when I started 35 years ago. On the other hand, there are also more opportunities. So,
is that the contrast between how UV Seed is a product and versus Relieve? One is consumer focused, and you have another one that is very, I would assume, has to go through a lot of approvals with the FDA.
The regulatory process for a class 3 implantable is incredible. Just the manufacturing and the quality plans that you have to put in place take sometimes years to piece together. You have to sit there, each subcontractor, each parts manufacturer, you have to have all these quality metrics and everything in place. Then you have to lay this down into a product. And then if that product has an electronic component, it's incredibly challenging to put that together. Then the software issue has all kinds of new regulatory process. So when you take a class 3 active implantable to market, you're talking about years of effort and cost to piece that together. On the consumer space, it's easier to launch, but the level of sophistication in terms of technology, has to be there. I would say your barriers to entry are much lower, but it's also much more difficult and much more costly to take it to market from the marketing and sales side. So on one hand, you have a protected environment. The FDA protects you. In one hand, it makes it difficult to get to market, but once you get FDA approval, it kind of gives you some market acceptance and or some market protection. Whereas in the consumer product space, you might have patents for market protection, some technology barriers, some know-how or trade secrets. but really it's marketing, sales, distribution, which are very costly. And that's where your numbers are in that particular space. So
each has
its own challenges.
Dr. Bonutti, let's talk about your latest innovation, UV Seed. It's a portable disinfectant device. And tell us a bit about the technology behind it.
The idea that instantaneously everything is disinfected or treated is just really, it's the fallacy, and it's fraudulent marketing by many of these companies that are marketing products. Understand that, for example, when you use these sanitizers and other devices, it takes up to 3 minutes before you're really getting a substantive effect, especially on viruses and pathogens, as COVID has been a big issue. The second is on our active implantable technology. This one is extremely important because what it allows you to do is modulate the blood flow to the brain. And if you can control, enhance, or slow down the blood flow to the brain, you can treat diseases in a whole new fashion. The reason the central nervous system, the brain, is so difficult to affect is because there's something called the blood-brain barrier that limits the size of particles that can go through the brain. So nourishment or medications that get to the brain or drainage of debris from the brain are both limited, both in and out. So this opens a whole new mechanism. If we can open the brain to medications that are driven through the blood vessels, for example, we can change the paradigm of how we treat central nervous system diseases. And so we have a product that has been developed for a small area to treat headaches. But the real goal is to sit and try and say, how do we impact the entire central nervous system from some of these complex diseases? So Elon Musk is looking at one way with his Neuralink company to try and put an implantable inside the brain with a robotic system. We're looking at techniques that so just outside the brain through a minimally invasive surgery to come to your sphenopalatine ganglion. And with that, we can open and close blood vessels to the brain. We can open and close the pores to the brain to deliver technology. And that changes the paradigm of how we can treat diseases inside the brain and things that previously have been unable to be managed or helped, from tumors to all kinds of central nervous system disorders. And the idea that, for example, with a stroke, your brain dies and the brain will never grow back, that may be a fallacy. We could deliver medications, stem cells, open up the brain selectively, deliver these. That's why technologies like this to me are so important and they're so critical, because they really will change the paradigm of how we care for people. And one is a simple consumer product, which day to day will affect people with diseases like COVID and others. And we're going to have more of these going forward. And it's not just COVID. It's also, basically protecting food sources and others that cause significant diseases, especially more people spend inside, fungi, molds, all these other things we can treat with this simple, safe devices. So we have an impact here, it's broad impact. And I'm looking at other space where we're saying, look, we're going to really change. And our goal is to really change how we treat central nervous system disorders and injuries. And so that's why I'm excited. And that's why I spend the time and the money and the effort to make sure we're really impacting something that's substantial for society.
So for UVC, you're thinking, or we're thinking consumer, but are there industries in which that mobile device in a very specific circumstance would be an add-on to a production process or?
Absolutely. So we can take this, for example, and put it in a water bottle. So you get water, you can take it through a filter, but that doesn't disinfect. It doesn't get viruses, doesn't get mold, fungi. So the same device, we're going to put it on water bottles and you'll have instant water disinfection. Whether you're in Africa, whether you're running around the United States, you can sit there, and with this, adding on to filtering concepts, you now can sit there and also treat and get yourself truly disinfected, sterilized water, as from a very basic perspective, all the way to food substance. So we're going to take the same device. You can put it in your refrigerator. People put food inside the refrigerator, think it's safe, it's clean, vegetable. We'll be able to disinfect inside your refrigerator. You close the door. This will work for a period of time to disinfect, and then you'll be able to open it. So same basic devices, going all the way for something as complex as pharmaceutical manufacturing. We've been contacted by multiple pharmaceutical firms where they go, well, we go inside and we try and disinfect when we're making pharmaceutical pills to deliver to people. We don't know what's been treated or what hasn't been treated. With our software, our systems, not just with ultraviolet C, but even with chemical, we'll be able to sit there and tell them what locations have been treated, what hasn't. Is it log 1, log 2, log 3 reduction? So we can sit there and say scientifically that not only have you treated it, but you've treated it and disinfected it. I don't like these things where somebody says, well, we're 99.9% disinfection. That's garbage. You have no proof of this. You're just guessing. Whereas our systems, we want to ensure the safety and the efficacy of the devices that we're selling. And so we have science behind it, and we're using technologies that enhance that. And so, yes, we're being approached by everyone from pharmaceutical firms to even companies that build refrigerators or simple food services organizations that can use this in a reproducible fashion. We even have a whole lighting system where in bathrooms you can disinfect the bathroom when no one's in the bathroom. It'll lights will come on, disinfect for the specific period of time, and when somebody moves in, shuts off, recalibrate the dosage. So these systems can be utilized in a number of different fashions, all because we have the sensors, the cameras, and the mechanisms to allow us to do this in a reproducible fashion. So yeah, we see it's again, this is a platform type approach.
Cool. Well, that's, I'm looking at it from an individual user. And as you were talking, I was just thinking I was doing a lot of traveling and going into public facilities. And after COVID, we're all going into public facilities somewhat paranoid about what's awaiting us. So I would imagine it would be a real anxiety reliever for people who feel that they're immune compromised going into areas where there's a large germ population.
Well, you are compromised, and you are being exposed to more and more germs in those facilities, and more travelers, the more and more crowded. And you have to remember, these germs are the range from viruses, which are really tiny, all the way to fungi and parasites, and to have systems in place that will allow you to treat and protect yourself, especially with more and more international travelers and the interactions in tight spaces. You can affect the air, the environment. You can sit there and affect spaces, rooms, surfaces, foods. All those are having greater and greater issues with resistant bacteria, viruses. And one of the beauties of this ultraviolet C system is there's nothing that's resistant to it. It may take a little bit more time to treat it, but you don't have resistance like you do with many of the chemical or other pharmaceutical treatments. So you have a universal system that it goes after all pathogens and really should give you improve substantially the safety. But it's so highly underutilized because people are afraid they don't know the efficacy. Are they really treating? Because you can't see it. And the second is the safety. Is somebody going to walk in and they're going to get zapped with ultraviolet light for too long a period of time and get some sunburn or skin burn? We address both of those because that's how science should work. We don't want to just have a technology that treats. We want a scientific approach so that we're doing this properly, safely. To date, no one's really spent the time to do this. That's why we think it's so novel and so important about the efficacy and safety and turning disinfection into a science rather than a game or something that's subjective.
So you have shared an enormous amount, Dr. Bonutti, and I really appreciate it. As you were talking, I was kind of writing down sort of a checklist, and what I was hearing about a first-time innovator looking at a new product idea is research, provisional patent, tight team, finding funding from those with experience, in your same domain, understanding your competition, having your intellectual property protected. I guess those are some of the key elements of someone who's sitting there. Maybe they're sitting even in a university, or they've left a university and they've been in their garage. You've kind of given them a checklist of what to go down. So what did I leave out, or did we get it all?
I don't know if you can ever get all, because every particular space that you apply, whether it's, let's say, pharmacology versus high tech versus software, each one has its unique challenges and variables. But ultimately understanding that there's a process that's not, every time you think it's something simple and easy, it's much more difficult than you think. Financially, making sure that you have enough capital to take this project further, whether it's your own or partners, because nothing is worse than taking something halfway down, having to stop because you're financially limited, and all of a sudden someone comes in and takes the idea over, the technology over, and is able to launch. It'll bother you for a long time to say, look, I did this, I got so close, and I failed or I didn't make it because I'm capital limited. So capital is always a big issue to make sure you can take this far enough downstream. And I think, you have to believe in yourself and you have to say, look, this is a long-term process. It's not something, 6 months, I'm going to sell this, I'm going to be gone. Those opportunities are extremely rare and extremely unlikely. If once you enter into this space, and it is great, and you have, I think, it's exciting when you have the opportunity to improve something in society, whether it's small, big, medicine, whether it's a small change or big change, you've added value. And I think it's really important to pursue this for anyone that has innovation or concepts about innovation, but realize that it's not the exit or the turnaround is a very, very long-term process. You have to have the right people around you. Legally, you got to make sure you dot the I's and cross the T's, and always look and understand what's the market size, what's the capital, so that when you look at an exit, you can sit there and say, hey, people will invest in me, and the end will be get you some type of remuneration, and not meaning you put it in your pocket. But most people are serial inventors. Very rarely do I see somebody that just invents one thing and quits and leaves. So having the capital then to push your next idea forward, your next technology, I think is very helpful.
So that was going to be my last question, but I have one more because you mentioned ideation. So how universal now is the understanding of the ideation process? Is it well known in the universities? Is it well known in the innovation space? So sort of truly my last question is, if someone hears the word ideation, what does it mean and where should they be going to look for a better understanding of it?
So ideation kind of is a generic word, but you look at it and you say you have an idea and you want to think about it. You want to pursue that. And an idea has to, in my opinion, has to have a problem that's merit solving. An idea coming de novo, just coming out of space says, oh, this is great, but what is the problem you're solving and who will it help? And I think that is a key part of the process. I talk to a lot of people and they have a little widget that might help a little bit in surgery, might do this, but what's the market? Who's going to care about it? Who will it affect? And the reason those important questions early is because downstream, you want to take this over the finish line. You don't have an idea just for an idea's sake. You want to have an idea so that if you're going to pursue this, that it has an endpoint that adds value. And you can argue ideation is writing a book or song, something like this, or in the space that I enjoy is to sit there and improve the quality of care. As you ideate, you have to put ideas in spaces that will, I think, add value to a large number of people. Just doing something that might help 1 or 2 or 3 people is nice, but the impact, the time, and your ability to pursue that further becomes limited. So I think the ideation process has to be linked to the final, which is commercialization, and say, is it worth the time? And if it is, pursue it with your heart and your time and your money.
Well, great. I very much enjoyed speaking with you today, Doctor, and letting me take you sort of on a winding road through innovation and learning about your 2 latest products. So thanks again for being a guest on Experience Voices.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
You've been listening to the podcast series Experience Voices, hosted by Jean Grey, publisher of American Entrepreneurship Today. Sign up for the series at americanentrepreneurship.com/podcasts.